Joining us now, Congressman from the 4th District, Randy Forbes. He is running for Congress in the newly configured 2nd District, and that'll be decided in a Republican primary June 14th. There's 3 candidates in the race. Congressman Randy Forbes, House of Delegates member Scott Taylor, and Republican lawyer Pat Cardwell. And that'll be decided, as I said, in the 2nd District on June 14th. So circle that on your calendar. If you're in the 2nd District, you want to be sure that you get involved with that and exercise your right to vote. That is an open primary. Independent, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter what you are. If you're registered, you can vote in the 2nd District on June 14th. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on that day. Congressman Randy Forbes, good to have you with us, sir.
Well, John, it's good to be with you.
So, look, Trump is going to win on the first ballot. He's going to be the nominee. And unlike your friend Scott Ridgell, you're one of the people who said you would back the nominee no matter who it is, right?
That's exactly right, John. We just can't afford to have another 4 years, much less another 8 years of the kind of policies that we've seen with President Obama over these last 8 years. And so what I'm hoping is that once we get a nominee, we can all get around that nominee, because then, getting the nominee is one step, but then we've got to make sure that nominee is elected to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I tell you what, tell Scott Ridgell, who said he's not going to vote for Trump if he's a nominee, that he's free to write my name in if he's looking for an alternative. Congressman, I want to get to the upcoming Chamber of Commerce Forum on May 20th. If I can ask you about that. I was shocked that one of the 3 candidates, Pat Cardwell, didn't get invited to that by the Chamber. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. I don't think your campaign had anything to do with that, but I have urged the Chamber to invite all of the candidates. I think Cardwell's filed, and he's out there knocking on doors, and he's legitimate. If they ask him in, do you have any concern at all with Pat Cardwell being in that debate?
Well, John, first of all, to emphasize what you said at the beginning, we didn't have anything to do with that debate. Secondly, we have said from the beginning we welcome everybody into the debate, so we wouldn't have any problem at all. I do think, though, you kind of marginalize yourself when you begin to call the Chamber of Commerce communist and those kinds of things, and it certainly doesn't help your cause very much, as Mr. Cardwell did. But certainly I'd love to have him or anybody else they want to put in the debate. We don't set those parameters that the Chamber does, and so we'll leave that up to the Chamber to decide.
Well, a point well taken, no question about it. That was a little bit over the top, no doubt. And thank you for calling me on that, sir. I appreciate it. Good feedback. Thank you. Before we get into some of your big seat power legislation, very quickly, I've just got to ask this question because everybody's asking it now. The religious freedom laws in North Carolina, Mississippi, we had one in Virginia that the General Assembly passed that the governor vetoed. Do you think these go too far? Do you think they're the right thing to do? I mean, you've served in the General Assembly, Congressman Forbes. What do you make of these?
Yeah, John, and probably all of the above. One of the things that we look at in some of this legislation and I'm a strong advocate of religious freedom. That's what we have fought for with the Congressional Prayer Caucus across the country, because some of the political correctness that we have seen is taking people of faith and saying that you can no longer express your faith, which has been a fundamental core principle of our country since its founding. Some of the legislation that's written, we believe, though, it switches the pendulum maybe too far. It isn't written as well as it should be. Other pieces of legislation, I think, kind of hit the right word, which is balance, and that's what people are trying to get. No one wants to coerce somebody into a particular belief. If they don't believe or have any faith at all, that's okay. It's just we've gotten into a world now, John, where political correctness, and as you know, it's not correctness at all, it's coercion. Political coercion sometimes makes all of us feel that we can't express our opinions or what we believe unless we're going to be ridiculed or criticized. And now with some of the things the government does, actually either fined or cost criminal penalties on you. And I think that's too far for our country to go.
Okay, so I think you're on target with that. What about this genderless transgender bathroom debate that's going on? I mean, I got to just be honest with you, Congressman, and people have criticized me and called me, what was the word, Michael? Generational Neanderthal. I just don't understand it. I mean, if I've got a child, I don't want a mixed gender going into their locker room. Am I that just off kilter with society now?
Well, John, I think what a lot of people do is on all these issues, they kind of miss what's really driving the issue. And, I'm in Congress, we're not dealing with bathrooms right now, so I can't really tell you that I'm an expert on this. But here's what I just understand, that it was the local government in Charlotte that passed an ordinance imposing on private individual companies and all what they had to do with their bathrooms. And from what I understand, and again, I quickly come back and say I'm not an expert on this, I'm not a state legislator, but the state legislature was trying to say, wait a minute, we don't want local governments telling private businesses what they have to do with their bathrooms. And I think, it's kind of ridiculous. It shows where political correctness has come, where we have with all the big problems we have to deal with around the country, and we got to deal with bathrooms. And one of the things that, I just have to say, though, kind of concerns me is, like you, I had a little girl, I had a daughter coming along, and, you go to a park, you go somewhere else, and, there's enough things to kind of be a little uncomfortable about, but she wouldn't have been very comfortable in a bathroom with men in there, and so I'm hoping at some point along the line we can strike some kind of balance in all of this, so that we can get this resolved and move on to the really big things which people are worried about, which is what we're doing with national security across the country and our jobs in our region, which are the issues we should be focusing our energy and our time on.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I want to get to your power legislation. I know this week the National Defense Authorization Act is going to get marked up all day. You guys will be in there till the wee hours today working on that. But your sea power legislation, it passed unanimously out of subcommittee, which is good news. And we understand that on top of that, you're introducing more ship repair provisions that are critical for our region. And one of them saying, which I thought, I saw what you did and I'm like, wow, what a great idea, which so I can share with my audience and then you can elaborate, which is basically if you're going to get a U.S. naval ship repaired, that it should be repaired in America by Americans and not foreigners, because those are jobs for America, which is, been our theme for a very long time. So elaborate on that and then explain why that hasn't been done earlier.
Yeah, John, first of all, the piece of legislation that I was able to get through my subcommittee last week, and that'll go through the full committee this week and then be passed by the floor, we believe is probably the most significant piece of legislation that any Virginia congressman has had for our region in jobs and perhaps even national security in the last 20 years. And, that's kind of being echoed by almost everybody that you listen to. And one of the big things it does for national security is turn this dismantling this administration has been doing with our Navy and with our Air Force and much of our military around, so we start rebuilding a 350-ship Navy. But then we're also looking at Hampton Roads, and it's not just jobs here, but it's what our sailors are having to go through. And so we have 3 points that we did on just parts of the shipbuilding. One is that the administration came in with a lot less money for ship repair than what the Navy said they needed. And, John, most people are just concerned about continuing to put our sailors out on ships that don't have all the repairs and all the maintenance that it needs. So we pulled that all the way up, and we've now given them $1.3 billion more to make sure they can do all the repairs they need, but also, John, to make sure that they can have the training hours and time that they need so they're prepared if they're in a conflict. The reason it helps us so much is because a lot of those repairs are going to be done in Hampton Roads and helps our jobs. The 2 points that you mentioned, though, one of them was this. If you have a ship that's going to have repairs being done on it, the previous law said that if that could be done in 6 months or less, and it was going to be done in the United States, it would be done where that ship was home ported. We've increased that to say if it can be done in 10 months, we want it to be where it can be home ported. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is because it helps us in Hampton Roads, where we do a lot of those repairs and have a lot of those ships home ported. But the other thing, John, is we want to look out for our sailors We don't want our sailors going to some other part of the country or some other part of the world while their families are back here and they're away from their families for that 10-month period. This guarantees they'll be with their families and be able to be here while that work is done. And then the last part that you mentioned, which is probably one of the most important parts, we're losing our industrial base because we're having so much foreign competition. Just doesn't make any sense to me if we're having major overhauls of our ships and we can do them here. We've got the best shipbuilders, the best ship repair people in the world. It's important that we bring it back here. That money comes into our economy, but it helps our industrial base.
Oh, look, you're absolutely right, and I'm happy that you're doing this because it doesn't make any sense to anybody looking at this why U.S. ships ought to be repaired by foreigners. They should come back home and then get repaired. It means jobs, and like you said, it gets our sailors home, so the whole thing doesn't make any sense, and we have to start to take care, Congressman, of our own and stop worrying about everybody else in the world. I want to get to the NDAA. You know, this is kind of, there's a lot of listeners out there. This is another acronym. It's kind of gobbledygook. What is that? The National Defense Authorization Act. But this is one of the most significant pieces of legislation annually that go in because it's billions and billions of dollars, right? And it affects so many things. Where are we on it now? And are there certain things that, as you go through the markup in the next day or so, into the wee hours, is there certain things that you are absolutely adamant about getting in there?
Well, John, thanks for asking that. You're exactly right. The National Defense Bill is essentially what it is. It's probably the most important bill in the country for our national security. It certainly is the most important bill for our region. The great news is with all the gridlock we hear in legislation that doesn't come out, the defense bill has come out every single year for over 50 years because it is so important. We will literally go in today. We'll start at 10. We'll stay till 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, making sure that defense bill is passed for the people in our country. And the great news is I get to write a major portion of that bill as chairman of the subcommittee that I oversee, which deals with all the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Air Force. There are huge provisions in there for national security. We have been dropping the number of ships we've had ever since Ronald Reagan left office. My bill this year, John, turns that around for the first time since Reagan left office. It's the largest commitment to shipbuilding that's happened since the Reagan era to start rebuilding our ships back up to 350 ship Navy. It's huge for our area, John, because the president wanted to take a carrier air wing out of the Navy, which could have impacted Oceana. I was able to stop that with this bill. They wanted to take additional ships out and not give the Marine Corps the amphibious ship they need. I was able to get that in. In Little Creek, they wanted to do away with some of the work that would have given the Marine Corps the ships they needed to go from the big ships to the land, the connectors. That would have cost us 200 jobs. I was able to get that in. We're even relooking at restarting the F-22, which could be huge for Langley. And we're going to start adding in another Virginia attack submarine, which is huge for Newport News. And that list goes on and on and on. The big good thing, I guess, John, is as chairman of the committee, nobody can get a single one of those provisions in without coming and getting my permission first to put it in. Our region has the person that gets to give that permission. That's why we were able to get so much of that for this area.
Now, remember, we had the debate about one of our carriers going to Jacksonville. Remember how that raged on? There was a bunch of Florida congressmen trying to make the case basically to get one of our carriers there, and part of their argument was that we didn't have the transportation infrastructure if anything happened. Where do we stand on that now?
Well, John, it wasn't just a couple of the members of Congress. Remember, it was the whole Florida delegation.
Right.
And the Florida delegation is twice the size of the Virginia delegation. The Texas delegation is also trying to get some of that. They're 3 times the size of our delegation. The reason we're able to hold it back is because of the chairmanship of this subcommittee, because, as I mentioned to you, they can have 25 members, even the Speaker of the House, but if he wants to get something relating to the Navy or the Marine Corps of the Air Force that comes under my subcommittee, he has to come through me first to get it. That's just the way it's structured here. In fact, I was with some of those Florida guys last night, and they were just kind of laughing because, I always tell them when we go to Florida, we're courteous. We want to bring back oranges. When those guys come up here, they always want to take back an aircraft carrier. But, John, for us in our region, you're talking 11,000 jobs, $600 million to our economy. That's a real loss to a region that's supported by the military for 45% of our economy and 36% of our jobs.
Well, it is a big number. I want to thank Congressman Randy Forbes for joining us today. And again, Congressman, since I've been on the air, January 1st of 2012, you've been one of the most accessible members of the Virginia delegation to come on whenever I ask, and I really, really appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. More information, go to forbes.house.gov. That's forbes.house.gov. And remember, June 14th primary, circle it, 2nd District, put it on your calendar. Thanks for being with us, sir.
Thank you, John. Have a good day.
All right.